Hello there and welcome to the card grotto. Today for my cards I'm starting off with two pieces of Bristol smooth cardstock and I'm using my EK Success anti-static tool just to add some powder onto those. I'm using that to make sure that none of the embossing powder sticks to where I don't want it. And then I've got the transparent triangles background stamp from MFT, and then I'm inking that up really well with the Versamark ink. This is a really nice sticky ink that takes a long time to dry, so it's really good for using with embossing. So I've just placed the cardstock over the top, and then I'm just using a bit of paper just to make sure my hands don't get too sticky from the Versamark, and just placing that over the top and then rubbing the back of it to make sure that I get a nice impression. So just doing that for both pieces. And then I'm going to apply my embossing powder, and this embossing powder is from Wow and it's the clear matte dull. I don't tend to use this much, but I really love it for resist techniques with embossing, which is what we're going to do today. And it just gives a really nice effect. So it's not shiny, it's matte, completely matte, and it kind of gives a look of like, how was that done type thing. So I do really like it for this technique. So just taking off the excess embossing powder there and then adding that back into my jar. And then I'm going to heat set that, and with this dull embossing powder you just want to melt it until it goes shiny, and then you just leave it and it just kind of dries back into like a dull matte finish. So you don't want to overheat it with this one, you just need to be a bit more careful. So here I've taken my craft sheet, which is a really nice slick surface, and I'm going to do the emboss resist technique with Distress inks. So I'm just using my ink blending tool here, and this is peacock feathers. Just adding that on. I'm taking it from the edge of the cardstock onto the cardstock and just taking any excess ink off onto a piece of scrap paper. So just going over the panel here, this is the cracked pistachio colour. I'm not really paying much attention to where I'm adding in the colour. I just want the colour sort of all over the panel, in, you know, like bits of colour everywhere kind of thing. So this is the Twisted Citron, and it does really brighten up the colours quite a lot. I do like this colour mixed with the other two. The camera is taking away a little bit of the vibrancy here, and I do apologise for that, but really pretty in real life. So I'm just using a bit of cardstock there just to get my fingerprints out of the way. And now for the second piece, I wanted to add some blue into it. So I've taken away the cracked pistachio and I'm using the Blueprint Sketch. Really nice vibrant blue, one of my favourite blue colours in the Distress line. And again, I'm just adding that onto the panel, and as you can see where I'm adding it on, it resists where the embossing powder is, and it just gives a really nice pattern. So again, I'm going in with the peacock feathers and the Twisted Citron, just going all over the panel there, just mixing them together. They mix really well. These colours you could be a little bit careful with them, just because it does, like blue and green do tend to make a brown, and it is a little bit darker in some places on this card. It didn't bother me at all, but just to be aware of that can happen. So just adding another layer of the colours there, just making sure that there's a little bit of each colour everywhere all across the panel. And then I'm taking my Distress sprayer here and just adding drops of water onto the panels. This Bristol cardstock works really well with adding just a little bit of water onto it. It's barely warped at all, and it was really good for the Distress inks as well. They blended really well on it, so I'm really glad that I used this Bristol cardstock. So just going over that again for the second time and just taking up the bits of water with some kitchen paper. And now I'm running the panels through my Cuttlebug using the largest of the Simon's Stamp stitched rectangle dies. Just using a little bit of micropore tape there just to keep them in place. And then I'm using the Happy Birthday to You die from MFT, and again I'm going to run that through as well. I want to make sure that I'm keeping all of the inside pieces of those letters because I want to replace them afterwards. So I'm just using my pokey tool and taking out the whole of the letters, and just using my cutting plate here just to keep them on. And then I can make sure that I can replace them and make sure I know where they go afterwards. So here I've got some black cardstock. This is Licorice Twist from Basil, and it's quite a thick cardstock, so I do score it on both sides. I'm using my Martha Stewart mini scoreboard here in a Teflon bone folder, and I'm making an American A2 sized card base. So just using my bone folder to make sure that crease is really well down. And then I'm taking a pokey tool and I'm just going around the edges of the panel here where the letters have been cut out, just to get rid of any of the excess little bits of cardstock that might be hanging around. And then I'm using a sand eraser from Tombow and just going over some of the edges, because sometimes you can get little bits of metal residue there. So I've added tons of foam tape onto the back of this panel. As you can see, I haven't been sparse with the foam tape, and I'm just going to add that onto my card base. Now I want to add in all of the little inside pieces of the letters, so I'm just cutting some really tiny little bits of foam tape down, just placing them onto the back of the little pieces and then placing them down with some tweezers. This did take quite a while to do and it was quite a fiddly job, so I wondered if there was an easier way to do it. So I took some Glad press and seal, and once I'd run that through the Cutterbug on the second piece, I then applied the cut and seal over the top, made sure that it was really stuck down well, and I flipped the entire panel over, and then again I'm applying the foam tape. Again, I'm being very generous with the foam tape, and before I add this onto my panel, I'm taking away the letters, the positive part of the letter, and then I'm using that peel and stick to kind of hold the panel in place while I add that to my card base again. So I can just add that down and then make sure that everything's stuck down really well before I lift off that peel and stick. And I did forget to add in that little bit of the A, so I added that in afterwards. I'm not sure it made that much of a difference, but you know, it did take a little bit less time. So here's the finished cards. I hope you've enjoyed watching. Links to all of the products that I use will be in the description bar on YouTube and also on my blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.